I'm Jinghua Zhao, Professor of Cities Transportation at MIT. Welcome to the MIT Mobility Forum. This is episode 155. I'm so glad to have Tilly Chang, Rachel Castignoli, and Stephanie Dock joining us for a panel discussion on AV deployment in cities. Last week, when Professor Carl Kochman, Robin Chase, and myself talked a little bit about our views, both the contribution and the challenges of autonomous vehicle to cities. At that time, I think I made a point that in terms of the state and the city relationship, in terms of AV, in most US cities, states write the law and cities bear the consequence. So today I invited three policymakers in three cities, specifically also responsible for the AV policy and deployment from San Francisco, represented by Tilly Chang, the Executive Director of San Francisco County Transportation Authority, about Rachel from Austin, Texas, who has been a lawyer and a consultant, senior consultant about the AV deployment, and Stephanie Dock, who's managing the autonomous vehicle and advanced mobility in DC. The three cities are in three different phases of AV deployment, right? San Francisco has been there for many years. People see that, experience it. Austin is just started about, and DC is coming in next year. Also, the three cities have very different governing structures, right? Which I will leave Rachel, Tilly, and Stephanie to share the differences there, right? So before we get to each of you to present formally, I'd like to invite the three panelists to give a 30-second version of what's the take-home message after this 1 hour conversation, right? I'll start with Tilly, please.
Great to be here with you. Thanks for having me. I'd say that the 30-second message from us would be to go in knowing what your objectives are and to understand the role that you would like this technology to play. Technology is a means to an end, not the end itself. And that for us, I'll talk a little bit about our goals, but that would be my advice for those who are entering this area.
Perfect. So understand the purpose of the technology, right? Rachel, please.
Yeah, Tilly put it very well, but I would say that the vehicle can be safe and AVs can be a real opportunity for safety while also causing issues in the system. So, the safety of the vehicle, whereas its lack of social knowledge about what hand signals mean, like how emergencies operate that all of us have as drivers, is really where we see that tension of that we think that the vehicles are safe and great and really like innovative and are going to add so much safety to our right of way. And we think that they're constantly kind of getting into almost ridiculous situations because they don't have the social knowledge that human drivers have. So balancing those two things for us.
Perfect. Yeah, this is social intelligence and a common sense, how to inject into the AV system. Stephanie, please.
When you are in control of your own destiny, in theory, it doesn't mean that the end is clear. So I think everything that Tilly and Rachel have said about being prepared and thinking about what we want, but also recognizing that it can be hard to translate all of that idea to reality in a timely fashion, and that trying to figure it out before it comes. Anybody else who's struggling with that prospect, you are not alone. We are also trying to figure that out.
That's very interesting because we see
shopping companion.
Right, nice. So DC, both a city and a state, so in theory has an authoritative power, but even so, there's still a lot of uncertainties, challenge there. Great, thank you, all three of you. So now I invite Tilly Chang to do the first presentation about San Francisco. Yeah, Tilly, please. You are on mute.
Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and share my slides. Is that working?
Coming. Yeah.
Great. So I'm Tilly Chang from San Francisco County Transportation Authority. I want to acknowledge my colleague, John Paul Velez, who is probably in the audience, as well as our partners at the SFMTA, the Cities Transportation Agency, and Julia Friedlander is representing them. Oops, can you see this? So San Francisco is an epicenter and has been an epicenter of sort of emerging mobility, innovative technologies, of course, for some time. We've been at this for a while, and both of our agencies, the SFCTA and the SFMTA, adopted our 10 new mobility principles, and many cities have this. So I think that's kind of an important sort of context, that we do have a playbook. We do have a sense of what we do want and what we don't want, and we're very much guided by our North Star, which is our transit first policy in San Francisco. So our goal, just to kind of get the end in mind, is to shape AV technology and policy, both of which are maturing, to help us meet our citywide goals. So we want to acknowledge that there's a whole transition, a whole sort of arc of development of this exciting new industry that has so much promise. And the question here is the path, the pace and the path of development. And we want to have a role in that. Our experience includes a lot of different types of policy and regulatory, legislative, and even operational experience. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. And we've most recently completed a report on the permitting framework that I'll also end with. Our early deployment is probably familiar to many of you who've been following this for some time. After many years of development and testing, Waymo and Cruise received the first deployment permits in San Francisco in 2023. Not long after that, unfortunately, Cruise had a couple of collisions and incidents, one involving a fire truck, one involving a very serious injury. And so after that point, of course, one of the consequences of that was that they first voluntarily reduced their permit after the fire truck crash, and then the DMV pulled their permit, and then Cruise itself stood down its operations and then ceased all national operations in the US. So in this period, I would say characterized by 2022, 24, it was pretty bumpy. There were some pretty good operations, but there was also a lot of conflicts. There were emergency scene concerns and conflicts, and we were just really struggling, I think, in a messy period to kind of work together as well as figure out how best to maintain smooth, safe flow for all road users. The operations grew like a hockey stick, and Cruise started with an overnight permit, 30 vehicles only, then expanded from there to full citywide deployment with unlimited numbers of vehicles. Waymo went from testing citywide to full deployment citywide, and from 100 to 300 to now 800 reportedly vehicles in San Francisco. So this only goes to 2024. So that's something that we continue to want to track with them. And we hear from the press reports that they are up to about 200,000 trips, we believe. I think it's per month. I'm not sure, but I think that's what they're reporting. So recently, Waymo has been operating more smoothly and successfully across the city and has expanded across the state and, of course, across the country, and even is heading into Japan, as we understand it. They are now being operating on Market Street, which is our car-free street. That's a recent development here, along with some black car, Uber, and Lyft services, as well as testing with a driver and safety driver behind the wheel at our airport. Zoox is also in driverless testing in San Francisco streets in a limited part of the city. And so far, so good. We're constantly trying to keep in touch with them and understand the challenges or issues that they're facing. And most of that is happening at the city side, operationally and with our first responders. But we're also monitoring sort of the overall impact of that as the congestion management agency at my agency. As I mentioned, our board just recently approved a report known as the Conceptual Safety Focused AV Permitting Framework. And this is something that was requested in 2023 when we were having some real concerns about, how are permits being approved at the state and federal levels? What does it take to demonstrate that they're ready, and how do they get advanced up and down, in both directions to expand, and to where does it make sense to have a transparent way to decrease that permitted operation? So we refer to this as a conceptual framework. These are illustrative examples of how regulators at any level can approach permitting in a way that is transparent, in a way that is data-driven and performance-based. Here we propose 5 different sort of stages of testing to deployment, with all different kinds of aspects of it reflected in many ODDs and in many types of conditions. And we propose that there should be various performance measures that reflect what we as cities and the community of practice care about. ranging from VMT to, of course, safety metrics, injuries and fatalities, also malfunctions, as well as first responder obstructions. And malfunctions here are known as unplanned stops. And these are just, again, illustrative. Our team is not the expert. We don't all, we all wish we had more research, actually. So I wanted to sort of shout out to the research community, MIT and others, to please continue to contribute to the knowledge that could help inform a practice such as that. Other AV resources, before I close, just wanted to share that these are available on our website. We do have a ride-hail fee that voters approved in 2019 that is generating a little bit of money for offsetting the impacts to Muni and street safety capital projects. Treasure Island Loop AV Shuttle was a federally funded pilot that we ran a couple of years ago, and our evaluation report is available online. We also participated in legislative efforts, that one of which was passed and one of which was vetoed, but both of them went the distance, meaning they went through the entire legislature. And in the veto message for the second one on reporting, the governor's signing message was that while he agreed with the need and the direction of the bill, it wasn't necessary because the regulatory agencies were going to handle it through the regs process rather than through the bill. And that is largely what happened. And CPUC has released updated reporting regs. We wish some of those regs were more transparent and even more coordinated and harmonized. And I think that's something that we can all talk about later across state agencies and with the feds. So I think this SGO is another opportunity at the national level on reporting. And our website has various resources as well. And our, again, ongoing initiatives include to share the permitting framework. We're working with various industry and research bodies, as well as we'll be presenting at ATS conference in Tempe, as well as working with UCLA on next steps. And we're developing various analysis tools and trying to make sure that all of these conversations and developments are inclusive, again, with the entire community of stakeholders. And happily, our Access for All program in California was just extended. That's a piece of legislation that addresses the TNC sector, providing a little bit of funding for wheelchair accessible vehicles, for example. So here we have an open call for collaboration and engagement to mature, again, these policies and practices together. Thank you.
So much, Tilly. Maybe I just one quick question. So if you were able to convince the state government to do one thing, what would that be?
The state government to do one thing would be to adopt a transparent, performance-based permitting process.
I see. Okay. So just to be clear, the AV permit framework you are developing is a recommendation to the state government to be adopted.
Yeah, I think it's a general sort of suggestion and sort of illustrative example of how any regulator, really, a federal, NHTSA, as well as the states that are developing these, as well as, even at the city level to some degree, in that the city is now sort of permitting at SFO and Market Street, these services. That is how any regulator, to maintain public trust, to build that database from which to develop policy, can ensure that happens as you go, transparently.
Indeed,
yeah, transparently and sort of performance based permitting.
Right. You mentioned the capability issue of the city staff members, etc. I mean, now here we're talking about San Francisco, DC, and Austin. If anything, that's probably have a stronger capacity. Think about the southern cities in the United States. Most of them have no chance to have any technical capacity on this.
Yeah, I think that's just going to happen over time, and getting into this with the Rachel and Stephanie, this capacity is significant, that if you're going to enter into this area, it's important to just go in with your policy framework understood and shared and aligned as much as possible. And I know the others are going to talk about this, and to have the ability to kind of meet the moment.
Right.
Because it's technical, it's policy, it's legislative, it's communication and interaction and engagement with the broader public. So it's a lot for any city, but it's not, it's something that we're all trying to share out so that everybody can learn from everybody else's lessons.
That's right. Good. Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
Hey everyone. I'm gonna share my screen and get you my one. Okay. So my name is Rachel Castignoli. I'm a senior consultant with Transportation and Public Works in Austin. This really is the Wild West for autonomous vehicles. We were talking earlier, we don't know how many AVs are in Austin. We don't know when a new AV company comes. Usually they do engage with us, but there's no state laws at all. And in fact, cities and the TxDOT are banned from making any regulations for autonomous vehicles. But like San Francisco, we had Cruise, we have Waymo, we have Tesla robotaxis here, which are a bit different because they are not using the radar and the LiDAR. And what we do have, and I would strongly encourage any city or organization to do this, is an AV safety working group. And this is a lesson we did take from San Francisco in 2023, and we meet really regularly, I'd say about every 2 weeks. Police, fire, our EMS, our transportation folks, and that's like our Vision Zero folks, myself, as well as, right-of-way and signals, our Homeland Security Emergency Management folks, and our airport. And so we're always meeting, we're always training together, we're always talking to AV companies together, we're really trying to speak as one voice, and we're collecting data and kind of creating as much standard documentation as possible. While I said we cannot regulate AVs, we do have an expectations document, and we give that to every autonomous vehicle company that comes into Austin, and we, work on it. It's a work in progress. We're always kind of talking through what our expectations are. Let's see. Okay, so we do share some data with AV companies, what we can, we're always happy to share any sort of public map, or even if it takes a little bit of work. So this is our map that we're sharing with everyone. We've got hospitals, fire stations, EMS stations, police stations, school zones, and it has special events. And this is a live map. All the AV companies have it. It lets them, make decisions about their ODG and their geofencing. And these are all, of course, planned places where we have critical infrastructure. For emergencies, we are following the same process that San Francisco and Phoenix follow. And we all, got together and talked through that process, which is large scale emergencies are coming directly out of our computer-aided dispatch system to AV companies. They're getting it the minute it goes into 911. And so our expectation there, although we can't, we don't have authority to regulate, our expectation is that they give those major fires, really big events, 1,000 feet for 1 hour. And we had a fire last weekend. I'll show some photos from it, kind of talking about where and why we need this, but we need this right now. And I do believe autonomous vehicles will get good enough, but that little box at the bottom shows how it goes to the AV companies. They get a lat long, they get an address. And we've had some success here. I won't say it's been fully successful, but this is because we really want to be good partners and we want them to succeed. Here are a few issues that we've had. And I would say our number one issue, which you're not seeing in these pictures, is hand signals. And that's because it's really hard for a robot to interpret what a human is trying to tell it. And we're really hoping that AV companies rely on what the cars around them are doing during situations like that, because, it's kind of a place where we have issues again and again. But you see that we have AVs getting caught in water and standing water during our floods that occurred 4th of July weekend. You can see an autonomous vehicle over a fire hose or charged fire hose. There was water in that, and that was just on Sunday. You can see we had a AV back over a cone, and that's right there outside of our University of Texas football stadium, Darrell K. Royal. And then we had, sometimes we see that they struggle with a chain, right? A chain across the exit or entrance of a parking lot particularly. And that's something we've seen all the AV companies struggle with and in all places. So we share this information. All of these are Waymos, but we have similar issues with Tesla. We had similar issues with Cruise. One thing we've really seen get better since the Cruise deployment in 2023 is they really do understand lights and sirens better. Like we have many fewer issues with them pulling to the right or, avoiding that. So there's some improvement happening. These are all spots where we're working with Waymo and Tesla on how they could avoid these in the future. We have a dashboard and it says it's updated 10.6. We've had 2 incidents since I put this together a few days ago. This is a public dashboard. You can go to it. You can click on any of those dots and learn more about what happened. You can filter by the AV company. You can filter by the year. This is what we're using, police, fire, EMS, transportation, to really work through how we're building procedures, and I will say, we are really aggressively we need the geographic information. So this is like residents calling or fire, like people doing reporting. We're not getting this from social media. We're not getting this from AV companies. This is just what people are reporting is happening. And it's helping us create better procedures, but it's also really helping us on an infrastructure level. So we do provide ongoing feedback to the company when we get incidents. They're usually getting it like once a week, or once a month. They're getting the list of all the incidents. We're looking for patterns and we're determining if it is appropriate to improve the infrastructure. And for that decision, we're looking at where AVs are struggling and then where regular drivers are having frequent crashes. So we're laying over 2 maps, right? Our crash map along with this AV incident map. So we have found a few places, where we've restriped almost entirely outside of fire stations. This is an area where, like you, a human driver, know like what to do when a fire truck pulls out or pulls in, which is the more common issue. But the AVs kind of struggle a little bit with it. So that's where we've really upgraded our signage, our striping, even doing the keep clears on the ground to help. And we find that the infrastructure upgrades like that help drivers as well as autonomous vehicles. So we're really happy to make those changes. Again, we're always working with these partners to like identify issues, who's responsible for those issues and how they can be fixed and what's the timeline for fixing them. Like you saw that picture of a Waymo in a flooded intersection. We know that a similar thing occurred in Phoenix a few weeks ago. So like, how is Waymo working on fixing that problem of the flooded intersection? And then we do share this information with state and federal agencies. We are pretty good partners with TxDOT. I know there can be a lot of state-city drama in Texas, but for emerging technology things, we're pretty good partners. We work on drones together. We work on AVs together. And there's a lot of AV freight in Texas, which in the city we don't deal with much, but TxDOT is heavily into AV freight. And then finally, we do a lot of collaboration. We have an annual stakeholder meeting with a petting zoo. And this is a picture from it, right? We had the Cybercab there, which was very exciting for Tesla to bring their Cybercab out. And we had Waymo, Zoox, Volkswagen, AV Ride, Tesla, all the folks who are here in Austin. And then we had, we work with our transit agency all the time. We work with the University of Texas as well as AISD, Austin ISD, our schools, right? We just trained all our crossing guards on autonomous vehicles. So we're always working with everyone who wants or needs it. We have the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind here. So we're working with our disability community as well. We participate in SAE, which I would highly recommend. They're doing a lot of great AV work. So I really like working there. I think that there's some really good best practices being built at SAE on the automated road or on-road automated driving. And then, we're always working with NHTSA, FHWA, anyone who wants our help or that we can share information with so that we're all moving together. And Stephanie and Tilly on this call as well. I think, everyone's seeing similar problems. And so once it's solved somewhere, whether that be Phoenix or San Francisco or Atlanta, then I think we can solve it. We can solve it here too. So, but yeah, that's it from me. Anyone can contact me or you can take a look at that webpage anytime you want.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. Last week we were talking about one idea is saying that the city as a regulator role versus city as an enabler role. Right. So, Rachel, I really appreciate this incident map and crash map that you develop and share with the industry. So there's clearly an enabling role that's you're playing here, right? Hopefully that the industry side can in return also behave friendly and collaborating with the city side. Of course, to what degree you do need more formal authority policy, that's a question that we should discuss. But one specific I'd like to pick up, you mentioned transit as important stakeholder you engage in. So tell me more about what type of question you ask, how transit and AV company potentially can work together.
Sure. So there's obviously the system in San Francisco where Waymo is kind of doing some support of transit. But there's also, have experience with incidents around our rail, right? Because like it's, on-road rail and things like that. So we're really working through, making sure that we all understand like what our rail looks like, what the procedures are. It doesn't look like San Francisco, so like different testing needs to happen there. So that's where a lot of the transit stuff happens, but also just making sure all the bus drivers, like know what an AV is, know how it'll act, like know who to call if one is blocking a bus only lane, things like that. So keeping that communication open at all times. And our bus system does have some automated busing in the yard. So they're really excited about the technology as well.
I see. One detailed question. When there's an incident, where do policemen send the ticket to the AV company?
Yeah, we struggle with giving tickets to AVs because typically you sign a ticket as the driver when you're pulled over and there's no one to sign it. We are giving those tickets to a registered agent in Texas, and every AV company has given us a registered agent to ticket, and we have been ticketing them pretty regularly.
I see. Thank you. Yeah. So before I invite Stephanie, I just repeat the norm of this forum. I encourage everyone in the audience to contribute one idea, either in the form of a question to the panelists or a comment. Feel free to type into the chat directly here. Right. Stephanie?
Great. Hi, folks. Hopefully that works.
Let's see.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, very well. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry, the phone that was running my audio overheated sitting in the sun. So
it's just in time. Don't worry.
Great. All right. So I'm with the District Department of Transportation, and as the intro kind of mentioned, and my title of my slide, DC is really a very unique entity in this conversation because we are also sort of a state. We have a State Department of Transportation when you consider federal funding purposes. So to begin with, I wanted to give just a little bit of background on why DDOT is unique, just so you understand where we're coming from. I'm sure you know where Washington, D.C. is. And all the basics of that. I have some intro slides, but the real key is that we are really a state and a local DOT in one. We have all of the functions that you would have across all of them. The only things we don't really do is much transit, and we're not responsible for for-hire vehicle regulation. But essentially anything else that happens between the building lines is my agency's responsibility. So this is among the recommendations you heard from Tilly and Rachel is really to prepare for what's coming. And DC has been thinking about this. In 2018, we put out an autonomous vehicles principle statement, knowing that at some point this would be coming with a real focus on safety, equity, efficiency, and sustainability. And I'll note that those descriptions, while those words get used a lot in transportation, the definitions are broader. Safety, for example, includes protecting consumer data, and sustainability is not just environmental, but considers financial sustainability. And the goal is that we should be, as the government, adaptable, transparent, comprehensive, and well-aligned. And that is definitely the day-to-day challenge of attempting to run the AV program for DC. So before I get into what we've done, I just want to note some of the things that we know are challenging about being in DC. We know DC is an attractive market for AVs in the sense that you get very good visibility to the people in Congress, to US DOT, other agencies, and also an international stage, right? We have the ambassadors, we have lots of diplomats. But because of that context, we also have a lot of challenges that are not specifically unique to DC, but are particularly heightened in many ways. Lots of places have motorcades. I would argue that we probably have more than most, and they look in all different sizes, right? It could be everything from the president or the vice president moving on street. They don't do that terribly often. They usually fly because it's so hard, but they'll shut down whole corridors in advance of that, typical of other locations. But also we run a lot of unannounced motorcades that are just a couple vehicles moving through as perhaps a senator is coming to the coming up to Congress. There will only be 2 or 3 black cars running all sorts of red lights. A lot of special events, including a couple big ones that lots of people are aware of, like the inauguration every 4 years. And then just a lot of, and this will come up again, a lot of overlapping enforcement agencies. We have 29 law enforcement agencies that can write tickets within our 68 square miles, and most of them are not the ones that are run by DC government. So even within our own small jurisdiction, keeping everybody on the same page, particularly on the security side, is going to be difficult. And then finally, and this kind of has come up in other senses, but we are the central city in a tri-state region. So on the one hand, we are a state, but at the same time, we're also at the very middle of a region, and our region involves Maryland and Virginia, and depending on the commute shed that you're looking at, goes as far as West Virginia as well. So where we are, we were a fairly early state in adopting AV authorizing legislation back in 2012, and really not a lot happened when that was passed. It did require a fallback, a safety operator in the vehicle. In 2018 was when we formally established our AV working group, and that's when that statement, principal statement that I just went over, came out. We had been internally meeting before then. And I should say I joined DC Gov in 2012, so I've been here for the full life cycle, though not always on AVs. And then in 2020 is when we did our council did a big update to our testing program. And that moved the oversight to DDOT, my agency, from the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is a separate agency. Our first proposed rulemaking came out soon after that, and my team started working at that. I switched over from our research program to the AV program and hired in some staff. I apologize for the giggles in the background if you're picking them up. The second proposed rulemaking was a large effort that really, we took what came out of the first proposed from our policy team, essentially threw it all out and started over because we had learned a lot once we had dedicated staff on the program. And then in 2025, we kind of closed some loopholes as we started to see more testing activity coming in to really clarify what was possible before the rulemaking. And the reason the rulemaking is highlighted here is that in order for us to do a permitting program, we have to have done a rulemaking. And you'll note the timeline here, which is one of the challenges that comes up throughout, is really that we want to be adaptable, we want to be responsive to what's going, and the industry is changing a lot faster than our rulemaking structure is allowing us to keep pace. Anybody in government who's ever been through rulemaking, my friends on the federal side, I feel for you because yours is even worse than ours, but it takes time, right? And so we're trying to get a third proposed rulemaking. We have to do third proposed because council changed the law, after which we hope to go soon to final. I don't have a specific timeline on when that's happening. So where are we? What has happened? Even with authorizing legislation, but without a permitting program, we still have had activity. Fort Argo was our first partners to come in. This is our mayor standing in, oh my goodness, apparently that moves. Standing in front, announcing the partnership. They came in for sustained testing. Incidentally, I started my job as the lead of the AV program in May 2022, and they pulled out in June 2022. So I did briefly wonder whether I actually still had a job if there was no one to oversee. But Uber came through, we think, sort of Optimus Ride did some work. And then we've kind of had a series of data collection, but in 2020, this year, Waymo and now Zoox have shown up to do sustained mapping and testing, eyeing the future where they will hopefully be able to deploy. That said, you'll note that my slides here with the timeline of where we are in legislation and regulation makes absolutely no mention of deployment. We do not have legislation for that at this time. And so that's kind of where we're headed. We're trying to get to testing permits. Right now, companies are required to notify us when they come in. We do need to know which vehicles, which safety operators. They do have to have a safety operator behind the wheel. There is no driverless at this time. And they can't be doing commercial deployments in this structure. And we do get crash reporting. But under a testing permit, we would get a lot more insight in the terms of data that's required for them, much more comparable to what California requires. And we would have a lot more say about whether they are on our roads. Right now, our ability to pull them would be limited. We're also working on standing up, kind of building from ideas we've heard from others, on an AV monitoring zone with the idea of trying to actually supplement ANIC data of what's going on with actual observed data. And then finally, and that's the monitoring zone is looking forward to a future when there's more activity and the permitting programs running. And then a deployment report with recommendations for legislation and regulation. That has to be gone through a lot of signatures, very similar regulations. So I have no promise on when the full report will be released, but fingers crossed, we'll have made it through the procurement process such that we can release the research aspects, kind of the background work. Industry has slightly different plans. I am still looking at recommendations for deployment. Industry is certainly saying we would like to deploy. So they said they're coming in 2026. I am eagerly awaiting how they're going to figure out to do that. But they also have political levers that they can pull that I, as a lowly staffer, do not. So with that, that was what I had. And always happy to chat or answer questions about what's going on in DC and what we have.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. One detail you mentioned is the tri-state challenge there, right? So it's even different from the New York City and New Jersey, where you have a clear geographical boundary, right? You cross a bridge, you know you're in. While DC is really penetrating there. You just kind of, so for that, how much the three states are actually working together to have a coherent framework here?
We're definitely in conversations. We're chatting pretty regularly with, with Maryland. Take a sip, cutie. And we're chatting really frequently with Maryland. Virginia right now doesn't have as much dedicated attention going to this. Neither of them have legislative frameworks either for testing or deployment. Maryland has an executive order that covers highly automated vehicles, and Virginia, I think we all think it's a fairly permissive structure, but there's nothing firmly there. But we are also initiating conversations through our MPO, and wearing my hat from other regions, I think I'm hoping that our MPOs can take some roles here, because as you mentioned in the prior chat, like it takes a lot of attention to be able to do AVs well. And so our smaller jurisdictions are not going to necessarily have those resources available. I mean, I myself am split between a few different programs, and we will, in theory, have to fix that if we get a lot of activity to the level of what Austin and San Francisco are doing, where we're going to need some more dedicated attention to be really running a robust program. So for the moment, we're a little bit saved that A, we don't have a framework, and B, or the permitting structure, but also I think everyone knows that the risks of coming into our market are relatively high, right? You've got to do it right, because if you want to convince Congress that you need less oversight of the AV industry, you better not be screwing up their travel on a daily basis. At least that's my assumption.
Yeah. Good. Oh, no, thank you. First of all, I want to thank of the three panelists, two have child care duty at the moment with the kids in back of the seat or the library. So thank you so much for joining us today on this, right? So I have some question to start, but also later I'd like to invite Rachel, Tilly, and Stephanie to kind of reflect on what the other panelists said and what triggered you to think about things, right? So maybe one thing, a question for you, Tilly, I would say, during our prior conversation, you mentioned there's often a folly saying, oh, during the testing phase, we need all this regulation, but during the commercial phase, cities should be outside of it, right? Challenge that folly, tell people why that's wrong. What's the necessity for city to be part of the important discussion here?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Jinhua, because, and I should really amend my opening statement, is that certainly cities as a takeaway need to know what they want. They also want to be able to be included in decision-making, and cities should be included in decision-making, as Rachel and Stephanie have been discussing, at all levels of government. And in order to be able to really provide that support, we need to have the data in order to understand that. We need to know what's going on at all stages. And in California, providers are not required to submit reports to the DMV during deployment. And that's a function of just an outdated regulation from over, many, many years ago, 10 years ago, that they're trying to update now at the California DMV. So when Waymo, sort of advanced from driverless testing to deployment in August 23, that meant that they didn't have to submit reports. So that becomes a voluntary sort of statewide report. Then the CPUC, of course, does still require commercial deployment, and they're not always harmonized. And we appreciate those, and we want those to be even more transparent, even more complete. Some of the data is redacted, as we know from the Lyft Uber. 1 year of Lyft and Uber data that has been released for ride hail in California. We do have a report on that. After all these years of TNCs in California, we only have 1 year of ride hail reports that is available to the public. So, locals have to be involved also at the national level. And we've been working at various forums to try and include the local voice. And we've been active, for example, I've been active in ITS America, which just put out an AI sort of national AV framework document in June. I refer folks to that. And, you know, not everyone agreed on everything because everybody's at the table, but we did ask for expanded reporting at the national level. The SGO is a tremendous, valuable resource, and we think it should be, for example, personally in California, in our agency, we're asking for VMT to be included. And I think a lot of folks do agree that that would be useful in order to support rate calculations. For example, how do you calculate or compare anything, AVs to humans, AVs to themselves as they get better over time? How do you really normalize that without VMT?
Right.
Finally, the local voice, and it requires also some resources and capacity, is not free. So sharing permit fees, having the ability to add an increment for permit fees to support all the local first responder interaction, all the people like Rachel, Stephanie, you know, ourselves, Julia, MTA, all of this takes time and resources. And it would be really nice for cost recovery to be part of the principle at the local level of setting permit fees.
Right. Yeah. So one thing on the data part, for example, the vehicle occupancy, etc., the empty miles, etc. One thing we notice is for a while through the CPUC report, you are able to they have the census tract indicator. You can identify that, but then I think starting December last year or something, it start to be read it out, so you no longer can differentiate those things. Right. There's a basic kind of a flaws in the data sharing process. Seems that's in some in Texas and Richard, as you said, you don't even know how many cars are there. So,
well, it ends up being very expensive because
yeah.
if the regulators don't require it and the companies don't provide it, then as cities and states, we have to figure out if we're going to invest in collecting it ourselves, which is that we can do that. It's just very, very expensive.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, particularly it's almost irony because one supposed benefit of AV is we have all this data that human being as a whole, we can share that. We can understand all this nuanced behavior there, but into the access, that's the challenge there, right? Yeah. So Rachel, tell us more about your Austin experience. I asked, so if you have the chance to convince the Texas state government to do something for you, what would that be?
Sure. So we have had a change in Texas law that passed in March that we anticipate going into effect soon that will have a permitting scheme by the Texas DMV. So we will, right, because there's no what we call like a kill switch in Texas. So when Cruise did have that accident or the crash really in San Francisco, Cruise was still operating here for weeks and we got so many phone calls. Even, you know, the state government got so many phone calls. If this is not safe in California, why is it safe here? And so Cruise did eventually pull its vehicles, but nothing required it. We did not have any laws to stop them. So that's something that the state of Texas has put in now, and the Texas DMV is in charge of that. The other thing that we have now is we require first responder plans. What I would love to see, and I don't know that the state of Texas can do this versus the federal government, is real standardization. Like our firefighters and police learn 5 different vehicles right now, and it's just going to get to be more, right? Like this is how we get into a Tesla. This is how we engage with a Zoox. Like, you know, Zoox has no steering wheel, and we are taking over and moving, you know, Waymos and Teslas on occasion. So this is how we get into a Volkswagen. So we would love to see a standardization of how first responders interact with those vehicles, just because they are very busy. It's very hard to get them all trained. We don't want them interacting with them for the first time in the field, like, you know, an emergency where like every second counts to have to deal with one of these. So that's what's creating resource issues in the city of Austin. And so I would push probably federal, but also state to, as much as possible, standardize how we interact with them so that we only have to learn once. We can train it up in academies, and these folks in the field can be as safe as possible when they're interacting with them.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Rachel. So the next one to Stephanie, but also to everyone, saying for AV operator to properly deploy and operate, they indeed need a lot of support from the city, right? The curb access is belongs to the city. Where do you put the depot, the zoning, the charging, all those things? Indeed, they really need the city and the city or state government to support in that, right? So Stephanie, tell us about your experience in DC preparation. What are the critical components that either DC as either a state or as a city can provide to help? And also, is it makes sense to use that as a leverage to say, we're happy to provide support, but also in return, follow some rules to follow so that can support the city better.
You know, it's interesting that you take that one because that's, I think, in many ways, probably Tilly and Rachel's tactic
right.
in many more because that is the the levers that they have. We are certainly keeping an eye on what's possible there. I will say a challenge that we're running into in that space is DC is not an industrial city at all, right? That's not why we exist. So we have a real shortage of land that can be used for anything like a depot. We don't have a lot of big warehouses. And so we are going to have to, we're trying to think about that because it's also, and somebody had asked the workforce question in the chat. I am, I guess I'm speaking a little as myself here and less as the city, but worried that if we are unable to bring in some of the maintenance and charging aspects of these fleets, that any of the workforce benefits that might accrue associated with this are actually going to be lost to us because they're going to go to Maryland and Virginia, where there is more land, more opportunity, because I mean, let's be honest, that's where all the warehouses that bring food and other things into the district are largely located. And so it also has a risk of increasing the zombie miles of empty BMT driving back as they deadhead to get to those facilities. So I expect we'll have at least small things here, and they will need to have smaller locations, but anything large scale that might have more substantial employment, we run the risk of not having that. So it does mean that if we're thinking not just wearing the regulatory hat, but the investment hat associated with this, that we do need a whole of government to approach to be saying that, because my agency is not the one that does land deals. We maybe could co-locate with our desire to have more public charging of fleets, or the part where we have needs for bus garages or other facilities. But beyond that, there's limits to what my agency could try and tackle in that space. But that said, I mean, with preemption kind of potentially looming, if folks get what they want on the federal side, whatever is being cooked up, that we also need to make sure that we are looking at the full range of levers that are available to us, not just our pure regulatory side, but also what can we do in terms of for-hire regulation. What can we do? And we do have the ability to regulate for hire. And so where can we be getting data on that side that can help us and build the norms around an expectation that you should know what's going on?
I see. Oh, so you touched on not only the state preempt the cities, but the federal government preempt the whole state. Thank you for mentioning that. It's an important point. Oh, Tilly, actually, that one thing on the market streets, right? It is car free, but Waymo get the privilege to drive it. That's a special deal here, right? What does the city get in return by offering that?
Right. Well, we're trying to understand that our sister agency, SFMTA, is in charge of that. And so the permitting, I think, obviously it's already happened. It's not just Waymo, it's with Lyft and Uber Black Car. And I believe they mentioned at their board that there's some data that is being required from the permit. I'm still trying to understand the details. So I think it's certainly things like how many conflicts there are to Muni. I think, Rachel, you mentioned something about supporting Muni, and I would characterize this as supporting our downtown recovery and our downtown and city economic recovery, and trying to make sure that it doesn't impact and negatively affect Muni. So that kind of data is being provided, as I understand it. We're trying to make sure that we have access to just how many trips are being provided, by Waymo, by Lyft and Uber Black Car service on a, whatever the case is, weekly, monthly basis, not just the impacts to Muni. And we also, it's our premier biking, walking, and transit street. Everyone uses Market Street. So it is certainly of high interest to everyone beyond just safety and, in terms of collisions and that type of severe and fatals. It's everything. It's, operational, it's access, and potentially, all the different effects on the economic and fiscal health of the city.
Good. Thank you. Let me give the forum to Chang for the question answer from the audience. Please.
Super. Okay. Very active chat as always, but particularly today, some interesting questions popped up early. So Stephen Sill asked the question effectively, what are the benefits, right? What are the benefits of autonomous vehicles? This was a very rich discussion about some of the concerns, but could you comment just very briefly, each of you, on what excites you about the opportunity afforded through this technology? If you had to
Yeah.
narrow it down to 1 or 2 words, what would that be? So maybe Tilly, we'll start with you.
Thanks. We all hope for the heaven and we fear the hell scenario of these, technologies. And again, folks asked about congestion, safety, affordability, and climate. Those are, almost all cities what we care about. We don't know. We just don't know, and we need to make sure that we are driving these technologies toward the ends that we want for our cities. I think the low density, low volume, first last mile circulation function is a really nice application for these, provided that we can make sure that it's harmonized with the local communities needs and labor. And in our AV shuttle pilot on Treasure Island, we were able to include everyone early, the local neighborhood groups, the nonprofit that we partnered with, One Treasure Island, schools, labor, workforce development efforts. And so we shaped it in a way that benefited everyone, even if not everyone fully agreed that with the AV, introduction of AV shuttle services. But I do think that's a nice way because transit needs to transform. Every city struggles, especially now with how to fund transit, and there's a tension between access and cover, fast, reliable service and coverage. So perhaps AV shuttle services can help with that function.
Yep. Okay. Lots of opportunity there. Rachel, your view from Austin?
Yeah, Austin does not have the transit stuff that San Francisco and DC both have. So we are a driving city. We're very dependent on our cars, and we had 104 road deaths last year, which is a totally unacceptable number. That's 104 people who didn't go home. And so we are our Vision Zero city. Our goal is to get to zero, but we absolutely want to see fewer road deaths. And if this can contribute to that, I think it absolutely can, then I think that, we're all in on helping it and supporting it, and things like that. Now, because we're the city, we have to look at our risks and our resources and what we're looking at. But yeah, the city is super supportive of autonomous vehicles and innovation. And, Tesla is located here, so we work with them extensively on how they're doing things. We train, we help them train their vehicles on what our fire engines look like and how our hand signals work. So we're really happy to work with AV companies. Volkswagen is also, ADMT is located here. But, we really, really, really want to end traffic fatalities. And that will happen when AVs are on the highway. So that's the day we're looking forward to.
Excellent. Stephanie from DC?
I think definitely 100% on the safety front. And I would say I have a 6-year-old sitting over here with me. I would love if he could cross the street to go play with the kiddos on the other side and not have to worry that people are going to run the stop sign in front of our house, right? That these vehicles could be safer, and it can mean safety for all ages and kind of a broadening of horizons in ways that is really difficult to do. But then the other piece that I see is both support. So from the city side, yes, supporting transit, but thinking more broadly, and I think this is a challenge to the industry, is we're talking on the cities, and cities are where AVs, at least on the passenger side, are largely coming. But we have an aging population, and we need to help figure out how to help them ideally age in place where they want to. And one of the key gaps there is transportation. And there are many reasons that someone might not take the bus, might not be willing to, it just might not be an option for them. And so the piece that's really, to my mind, and where the broader value also starts to come, is in recognition of the movement that it can enable in places that we really do need to think about how we can't just directly replace it. So from a city side, I want it to be for safer bike head, how can we support our transit system? But more broadly, then also how do we keep the whole population moving in a way that keeps them fundamentally engaged in our society, so that less isolation, all of that. And some of that is not going to come without investment on the government side. I spend a lot of time thinking about what we regulate. I get to spend some time thinking about what we incentivize, and I spend very little time thinking about what we could invest in. I'd like to change that eventually, but first we have to have these base frameworks in place. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time, right? We can do all of these things. But when you talk to us as cities, we are often wearing our regulatory or our incentivizing hat. And the investment side, it's still been, Tilly, you've done some of it, but it's still a work in progress, and it often requires a federal grant to support, and we don't necessarily have the long-term thing. So I think that's the piece that why we always sound so down, is we're all just trying to keep the whole system running while this new tech comes in.
If I might
Go
just
for it, Tilly.
add on that, it's not about sounding, I mean, we all are optimists, I'm sure, especially a lot of our homegrown technologies, are from the Bay Area. We're very proud of that. And they can be directed to achieving our goals. But we've seen from the TNC experience, and our agency documented, it's on our website, that the early stages of Lyft Uber did not help us achieve our goals. And it conflicted with a lot of our goals downtown. Like 1 in every 4 vehicles in the 2019 era pre-COVID was a Lyft or Uber. And this is an area for a transit-first city that's been investing for decades to keep downtown walkable, bikeable, and it's our premier transit, transit-oriented area. So that was a big concern, and it led to the TNC tax, which is a very modest tax. That's not congestion pricing, right? That is not demand management. That is a small, modest fee to offset the cost of providing Muni and protecting Muni and sustainable and complete street projects. So we do have experience that informs
Absolutely.
our judgments.
that trust, Tilly, between the businesses entering the city and the city itself. I think there are a lot of lessons to take away from what happened 5 to 10 years ago. And I would also just say, Stephanie, your point about an aging population, I think is really fantastic. David Capelli mentioned it in one of his questions. How are we thinking about, how are we serving the elderly, but also the blind and folks with disabilities and so forth. And then just finally on safety, I think Bhuvan posted in the chat the latest Waymo data are really quite compelling, particularly for vulnerable road users, cyclists and pedestrians, who, as we all know, if you look at the 40,000 plus fatalities each year in the United States on our roads, very sadly, increasingly more of those people who are killed are outside of the vehicle on the sidewalk or as a cyclist rather than inside the vehicle. So, this is certainly a pressing issue, and the data coming out of Waymo are really quite impressive in terms of the impact on vulnerable road users.
Yeah, we appreciate them putting a lot of information out, John, but I'll just note that Waymo is one provider. And the national and in California approach is to be sort of self-certification approach for licensing. And safety assurance is really important because we don't know if the next operator will be an inferior provider versus a superior or, average provider. And we can't have a regulatory and licensing system that relies on everyone to be, superior. So we're trying to promote a safety culture, a safety practice, safety assurance, even, a national driving test and competency and safety cases with standards. So a safety case without standards is just PR. A safety case with standards, I think, is something that then all the different states could buy into to have a national sort of framework, the next generation framework for safety assurance.
Yeah.
Jinwa, we could go on. I mean, just topic-wise, there's a lot of talk as well about pickup, drop-off, lots of interest in how cities are, sort of thinking strategically about managing the curb. There was a question about, could we return to Robin Chase's challenge from last week? Have any cities seen unexpected use cases for AVs? The chat is very rich. We'll share that with you. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, how to encourage sharing, increase the vehicle occupancy. Then also to the point I think Tilly made is, given that if an accident happens to AV, it hurts the entire industry, it's actually to Waymo or big players' interest to have a coherent safety standard, application standard on this, right? So everybody, please join me. Thank the panel, Rachel, Tilly, Stephanie again for today's presentation and conversations. Really wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, Stephanie and Rachel, before you have the children like you have to take at the same time. Thanks everybody. So yeah, so if you don't mind, stay for a bit. We have a short debrief. We want to create a breakout room for everybody else in the audience. A quick announcement: next week we'll switch gear to talk about public transit. We have Judy Kirschbaum from the San Francisco Municipal Transport Authority and Tom McComb from Chicago Transit Authority talk about the state of play in the U.S. public transit. Have a good Friday and see you next week. Thanks. Bye.